Victor Cray understood something that most men in Bay City didn't. He understood that the most dangerous arrangement isn't the one made in the dark. It's the one that becomes a habit. He had spent 11 years building a city where everyone who mattered owed him something. They hadn't been coerced. They'd been accommodated. And they had kept coming back. The woman who walked into my office 2 days ago knew all of this. The question now was whether what her father had built could be dismantled before the men he'd built it for decided it would be safer to burn it down, and everyone asking questions along with it. Eleanor arrived at 8:30. Same coat, different route. I watched her from the window. She sat across from the desk with a small card face down in her hand, didn't put it on the surface, didn't offer it, just looked at me.
Before we discuss the judge, I need to understand something. How confident are you that Agent Carver doesn't already have the mechanism?
He's had 8 months on Cray's case. He has the outcomes, 3 freight decisions, all beneficial to the pier corridor. He doesn't have the connection to your father.
Then we have a narrow window, because if Carver builds it independently, without the registry, it's federal evidence, and my father's personal record becomes irrelevant to everyone.
He can't build it without the registry. He'd need a transaction record showing your father's specific involvement in each arrangement. That's what the ledger is.
In 1943, my father wrote to me about an arrangement with the bench. He didn't name the judge. He never named anyone in writing, but he described the case. Freight evidence, pier transfer records, a procedural error that made 3 volumes of documentation inadmissible.
Aldermaine's ruling.
Yes, I recognized it from what you told me last night, but I also know something you don't have yet. My father wrote about the bench 3 separate times across 11 years. Not 3 cases, the same man. 3 arrangements, the same judge.
She placed the card face down on the desk between us, still didn't turn it over. How far back?
The first reference is 1943. The last is 11 months ago. November. A pier lease renewal dispute where the ruling favored the freight corridor. My father was very pleased with that one. He used the word reliable.
Reliable. That's not a one-time arrangement. That's a relationship.
He considered it his most stable client relationship. He used that phrase, stable. A judge who could manage freight evidence in the Bay City court system was, his word, infrastructure.
Victor Cray had bought a judge, and then he'd kept him. For 11 years, every time freight evidence looked like it might reach a courtroom that mattered, there was a sitting judge in place to manage it. The Harwell trial, Aldermaine's assignment.
Isn't a coincidence, no.
Calloway moved the assignment through a court administrator.
My father's clients are very capable, Mr. Malone. They didn't simply pay for a service. They learned how the service worked. When my father disappeared, they began doing it themselves.
The administrator who made the assignment resigned this morning.
That doesn't surprise me. My father trained his clients to clean behind themselves. It was one of the conditions of the arrangement.
She turned the card over. One word, written in her own hand. Aldermaine. She had brought confirmation, not information. She already knew. You had this before you sat down.
I had the shape of it. You gave me the name last night. The Gazette, Rosie Carmichael, the trial assignment. I spent the night connecting my father's 3 bench references to the public court record, the 1943 case, the 1948 Pier Authority decision, the November lease dispute, all Aldermaine.
3 rulings, 11 years. He's not a client. He's an asset.
He's the most important thing in my father's registry. Without Aldermaine, Calloway's entire decade of Harbor Commission work is exposed. Without him, the Harwell trial opens with Thomas Delacroix's file intact and the freight corridor under full examination.
With Aldermaine presiding, he controls the evidentiary process.
Which is why the assignment is the move, not a precaution, a deployment. Calloway positioned his most useful asset before the trial board was even set.
Victor Cray's registry didn't just document arrangements, it documented relationships, clients and assets, and at the center of both was a sitting judge whose name would end 3 decades of careful work if it ever appeared in an open courtroom. The car outside your hotel this morning, blue Plymouth. It was there before I arrived.
I know, I took the service entrance.
Professional.
I had a very good teacher.
Your father's registry. You said you've never seen it. You only know it exists from his letter. Does the letter say anything else? Anything about where he'd put something that valuable?
He called it the second room. Once, and only once, when he described where he went in the 3 days before he ran. He went to the office, and then he went to what he called the second room. I assumed it was a secondary workspace, somewhere the clients didn't know about.
He used that phrase only once?
Only once. In the context of the registry being safe, he was very specific about that. The second room was where he'd placed it.
The second room. Victor Cray had used a phrase precisely once in 11 years of correspondence. That kind of precision is intentional. He wanted her to remember it. He just didn't want anyone else to be able to find it. I went to the phone box at the corner of Kellerman and 3rd, not the office phone. The office line was too easy to monitor, and I didn't yet know how much of this city was paying attention. Aldermaine, 1943, Harbor Commission freight case. I need whatever Bay City PD kept from the original referral. The case is closed, dismissed at pre-trial 12 years ago, Malone. Sutter was your D.A. Sutters, the type who kept copies. There's a file, in records. I'd have to pull it personally. Give me until end of day. The court administrator who moved the Harwell assignment, Fielding. What about him? He resigned this morning, an hour after the trial date was public. I hadn't heard that yet. That's not good, Malone. Someone positioned Aldermaine ahead of the announcement. The assignment sequence was unusual. I noticed it at the time. 3 days early, senior administrator, not the standard clerk rotation. I didn't know what to make of it. Now you do. Now I do. The Plymouth outside your office, not mine. I know. Be careful with the file. End of day. Don't call me here again. And Malone, a sitting judge, is a different order of problem. You understand that. He doesn't just control a verdict. He controls what evidence gets to a verdict. Keep that in front of you. He hung up. I walked 2 blocks before I looked for the Plymouth. Different spot on the curb, same car. Patient. Not worried about keeping pace. Confident. 3 days before Victor Cray ran, he went somewhere called the second room. An administrator who'd moved the Harwell assignment had resigned before noon, and a sitting judge who had been managing freight evidence in Bay City courts for 11 years was about to preside over the most important freight-related trial in the city's history. I left the phone box and walked north on Kellerman. Slow, deliberate. The Plymouth turned onto Kellerman from 4th Street, 3 cars back, unhurried. It had been waiting at the corner, not following from the box. They had more than one car. I stopped in a shop doorway and watched the glass. The Plymouth pulled to the curb half a block back and waited with me. It didn't pretend otherwise, not trying to hide, letting me know it was there. I crossed to the east side of the street and walked 4 more blocks. The Plymouth crossed with me, 3 cars back, unhurried, confident, not worried about losing me. Confident they knew where I was going anyway. Not federal. Federal surveillance is patient and invisible. They don't want to be acknowledged. This was something different. This was a message. We know where you are. We know what you're doing. We're not concerned enough to hide. They weren't going to move against me in daylight on a public street. I was more valuable to them mobile. A thread they were pulling, hoping I'd lead them to something they couldn't find themselves. The registry, or the woman who knew it existed. Carver was at the mercantile lunch counter at noon. He'd been there before I arrived. Not waiting, already eating, which meant either coincidence or surveillance. And I'd stopped believing in coincidence about 12 hours ago. You're following the Plymouth.
The Plymouth's been active since yesterday morning. It's not federal.
Federal surveillance doesn't park in plain sight. This is a message.
Someone wants you to know you're being watched. That's a specific operational choice.
You know about Aldermaine.
We've had him on a watch list for 8 months. 3 freight-related decisions, disproportionately beneficial to the Harbor Commission corridor. We couldn't build the mechanism.
The mechanism is Victor Cray's registry. 3 arrangements across 11 years. Same judge, same freight corridor. Not a one-time fix. Infrastructure.
How did you get that?
Eleanor Cray spent last night cross-referencing her father's correspondence with the public court record. 1943, 1948, November of last year. All Aldermaine. All freight. All rulings that buried evidence before it could be properly examined. Carver put down his coffee. That was the tell. 8 months on the case, and we'd just handed him the piece he was missing.
The Harwell assignment.
Moved by a court administrator named Fielding, who resigned this morning, an hour after the trial date was public.
Fielding's already on our radar. The connection to Calloway is indirect. A freight company that retained a law firm that Fielding's brother-in-law partners in. 3 steps removed. We couldn't use it.
You don't need Fielding. If the registry has Aldermaine's name, the specific arrangements, what was asked for, what was delivered, what was paid, that's a transaction record for 11 years of corruption on the Bay City bench. That's not circumstantial.
Which we still don't have, and which 2 sets of people with significant resources are actively working to prevent from surfacing.
3 sets, including you. You want it in evidence. The clients want it destroyed. Eleanor wants the personal elements separated before anyone reads it. Everyone has a competing interest in that registry. He looked at me for a moment, then at the window. The Plymouth was at the curb across the street.
What do you want from me?
Bryce is pulling the 1943 case file from Bay City PD records. End of day. If you have anything from your 8 months that connects Aldermaine to Cray directly, a witness, a financial trail, anything, I want it.
In exchange for what?
In exchange for telling you that Victor Cray, 3 days before the federal warrant was issued, went to a location he called the second room. Eleanor has the phrase. She doesn't have the location. If we find it, you'll know.
That's not an even exchange.
It's all I have. Take it or spend another 8 months watching Eleanor's hotel from a car she's already learned to avoid. Eleanor was waiting at the office when I got back at 3. She'd made coffee. I'd been gone 2 hours, and she'd already found the percolator, located the spare cups, and rearranged nothing else. Respectful, but comfortable. She'd decided this was a working arrangement. Bryce's file arrived at 4, a sealed envelope through the mail slot. 12 pages of carbon copies. D.A. Sutter's original referral notes. The chain of custody challenge. And Aldermaine's ruling. 2 paragraphs, concise, citing a procedural error in the evidence chain that had been introduced after the filing date. The procedural error was manufactured. I could see it in the filing sequence, a document amendment submitted 2 weeks before the ruling on a form that the Bay City court system hadn't adopted until the year following. Someone had backdated a document. The judge had accepted it without question.
Frank, it's Rosie. You'll want the court section of the late edition.
Go ahead.
The court administrator who signed the Harwell trial assignment, Fielding, resigned effective this morning. Personal reasons. 14 years at the court office.
When did it file?
Before 9 this morning, Frank. Before the trial date was even announced publicly.
Before the announcement, which meant the resignation wasn't a response. It was a step ahead of one. Fielding had been told to go before anyone could start asking him questions about how the assignment was made. Calloway's people were very good at cleaning up. Eleanor had been reading the Sutter notes while I was on the phone. She set the pages down with a particular kind of stillness, the kind that comes from reading something you were half expecting, but hoped not to see.
The procedural error. My father arranged this.
Yes. Backdated a document, an evidence amendment, and submitted it through the case file 2 weeks before the ruling. The judge cited it as grounds to dismiss the entire evidentiary chain.
He was very good with documents. He considered it a technical skill, like carpentry, something that requires patience and precision.
The same mechanism appears twice more, 1948 and November of last year. Same pattern. Evidence challenge, procedural grounds. Aldermaine accepts without scrutiny.
11 years. Not one transaction. A relationship. My father always said a client is only as loyal as the last time you made his problem disappear.
Calloway's been making Aldermaine's problems disappear too, without your father, since the warrant.
My father taught them well. That's exactly what he would say.
She said it without bitterness, just recognition. A woman who had grown up watching her father build something and now understood precisely how durable it had become. The trial is 8 weeks away. Aldermaine presides. If the registry doesn't surface before the evidentiary phase, he buries Thomas Delacroix's file the same way he buried the 1943 peer records.
The same records Thomas was building a file on.
The same records.
Then we have 8 weeks to find where my father left it.
The second room. Your father visited 2 locations in his last 3 days in Bay City, the office, and then somewhere he called the second room. What do you know about his secondary locations? Spaces he maintained that weren't on the public record.
He had 2 offices I knew about. The registered address on Commerce Street and a secondary address in the Harbor District. The Harbor address was where he held certain client meetings. I was never invited there.
Harbor District, South Side?
South Side, Calloway's territory as it happens.
Calloway's territory. Victor Cray had kept a secondary office in the freight corridor of the man who was now searching his daughter's apartment and running surveillance on anyone who talked to her. Either Cray was utterly certain of his position, or the secondary office was already known and cleared. The secondary harbor office, is that different from the second room?
I believe so. My father distinguished between them in the letter. He said he went to the office, which I assumed was Commerce Street, and then to the second room. 2 separate locations, 2 separate visits.
2 locations in 3 days before he ran.
Yes. And he used the phrase, the second room, only once in the entire letter. My father was not a man who repeated himself accidentally.
The second room is where the registry is.
That's what I believe, yes.
The Plymouth was gone from the curb at 8. Gone the way things go in Bay City when the people behind them have other things to attend to, not resolved, suspended. I spread Bryce's 12 pages across the desk, the 1943 case file, D.A. Sutter's referral, the manufactured evidence amendment, Aldermaine's two-paragraph ruling that had buried 3 volumes of peer transfer records and kept a decade of freight corridor arrangements out of every courtroom in the city. Victor Cray had built something more durable than anyone on the outside had understood. Not just a registry, an infrastructure, a sitting judge, a shipping magnate, a decade of carefully managed court outcomes. The men who had paid for it didn't just want the registry buried. They wanted to keep using the system Cray had built for them. Which was why Aldermaine was on the Harwell trial, not as a precaution, as a deployment. Calloway's most important asset, in place before the prosecution had finished preparing its evidence. 8 weeks until the trial, 8 weeks to find a place Victor Cray had described once, precisely as the second room. I didn't know yet what the second room was, whether it was a physical location or a phrase that pointed to something else, but Victor Cray used words carefully. He had written the second room once in 11 years of correspondence. Once. Which meant it was a signal, not a description. I wrote the phrase on a card and set it on the desk beside Aldermaine's name and Eleanor's hotel number. 3 things. The name of the judge. A phrase from her father's letter. The number of a woman sitting in a room on Fenwick Street who had memorized everything her father had ever sent her. Somewhere in Bay City, in a place called the Second Room, 11 years of the city's most expensive secrets were sitting in a bound record. 2 men with significant resources wanted it gone. A federal agent wanted it in evidence. A woman wanted the personal pieces separated. And somewhere across 5 states, a man named Victor Cray was waiting to see who found it first. The Midnight Files will continue next week, same time, same station. I left the pages on the desk and turned off the lamp. The rain came back after midnight. I let it.